Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about doing contrasts here. So we talked about how you set up your contrasts initially. And so here we are looking at 4 groups, and in this first contrast we are comparing groups 1, 2, and 3 against the control group. The second contrast we are comparing groups 1 and 2 against group 3. And then this third contrast, we are comparing group 1 against group 2. So if we have a significant ANOVA, the contrast will then tell us which groups are significantly different from one another. So here is another example. Again, we've got 4 groups, and the first contrast is going to be comparing these two against these 2 control groups, and then it's going to be comparing these 2 groups against each other, and then the control groups against each other. So in the text, it talks a little bit about how do you plan your contrasts. And so a couple of rules. So the first rule is groups are coded with positive weights compared to groups coded with negative weights. So I've got 2 groups here. I've got 15 minutes and 30 minutes. So each one of those are coded as a positive 1. And then I'm comparing it against a control, and that is coded as a negative 2. Rule 2, the sum of weights for the comparison should be 0. So when I have a positive 2 and a negative 2, that gives you a code of 0. Rule 3, if a group is not involved in the comparison, assign it to a weight of 0. So here I'm comparing 30 minutes to 15, so I've got a positive 1 and a negative 1. The sum of that is 0, and I'm not comparing the control, so the control gets a value of 0. So rule 4, for a given contrast, the weights assigned to the groups in one chunk of variation should be equal to the number of groups in the opposite. So again, here I've got 1 and 1. Here I've got 2, and here's 2. If a group is singled out in a comparison, that group should not be used in the subsequent contrast. Okay, so what does that look like in SPSS? So when you are running this in SPSS, it's going to tell you the very first contrast, I've got negative 2, so this is my control, and I've got positive 1 and positive 1, so it's 15. So it's comparing the control against these 2 groups. The second contrast is the control gives a value of 0, so it's not even included in this contrast, and now we're comparing the 15 to 30 minutes. And then we'll talk a little bit about these contrasts later on.